I would like to say a few notes of opening our discussion on the last panel of the future of ESPAS. And we have four of the best people here in the room to be able to be part of our panel. They're all well known to you all. So I think, though, that to have an idea of where we're going to, we need to have an idea of where we have come from. My good friend Otmar referred this morning to the two budget lines which I submitted to the Budgets Committee for the 2010 and 2012 budgets which installed ESPAS. The momentum from this action didn't come from me, oddly enough, but it actually came from a very good friend of mine across the Atlantic called Matt Burrows. Matt, I'm sorry, I have to cite you in this one because you were the one who gave me my marching instructions, because you had said at the end of a meeting here in December 2008, wouldn't it be nice if we did something jointly between the US and the EU? And my reply was to you, well, we'd love to, but we don't have anything to be able to cooperate with. So that then started what I would call the construction phase of ESPAS, where these budget lines set out the principles for ESPAS with the funds to do so. And I recall just one phrase in the amendment which I looked at this afternoon, because I think it just says very much what we've just been discussing. And that is that the focus was to set up an interinstitutional system identifying long-term trends on major policy issues facing the EU. The intention, quote, is to provide common analyses of probable outcomes on major issues to be available for policymakers. We've gone some way down the road, but as our discussion this afternoon shows, we still have quite some way to be able to refine that particular delivery mechanism. But during that period of 2010-2015, we organized no less than 3 major conferences here in Brussels and published 2 very valuable long-term trends reports looking to 2030. So what we're now doing is ending what I would call the consolidation phase of ESPAS during the period 2015 to 2019, where we've had excellent annual conferences, mostly based on the major issues which we had highlighted in the 2014 report. We've been very regular and very, if you like, fluid in the way in which the system has been built up. But I think we should note that the last report, which was done by Florence, drafted by her, was actually an innovative way of doing things, because on the basis of material we established think pieces, and these think pieces weren't just kept within the institutions, they were actually put out online as they were produced on Orbis, and they're still out there this afternoon because, Frank, you've kindly enough been able to put access directly to the Orbis website. So the fact that we've been able to have think pieces developed on particular issues which were prioritized so as to be able to feed in material, we had then also developed then this idea of a website, which is now, within this period of a 5-year period, the biggest global trends resource globally on long-term trends material, with over 1,000 documents already there, contributed voluntarily, probably by a number of you in the audience from right across the globe, and it gives a fantastic resource which we've scarcely begun to use, I suspect, in the way in which we should deliver material to people who might actually want that. So what does this mean? I think it means, to be honest in any language, that this is a strategic EU foresight network and a superb collective achievement. So what next now for the next decade? That was 1 decade, if you like, of work, which has been remarkable. But today we had some really good ideas from Vice President Otmar Karas of the European Parliament. Yesterday we had some excellent ideas from Vice President Šefčovič, who, as we all know, is now coming into office being responsible for foresight. So I think that you would expect there now to be ideas beginning to flow around. And you wouldn't be surprised to understand that a system like ESPAS, having done no less than 3 reports in the last decade on 2030, also has a document about what ESPAS should be in 2030, but guess what? It hasn't been released yet, and the leaks haven't been that good to be able to get it out to everybody around. But we have some ideas, and we would obviously like to hear from you as to exactly how this system should develop. But I think the best way we can kick off this particular process is now to turn to each of them in turn, 3 minutes maybe, because We have the clock. Actually, it's very useful to have a clock, so you can see exactly where it is, so I don't have to take any control. And so, Klaus, over to you, maybe for 3 minutes, something like that. If we can get some interaction with people on comments, that would be good. And then finalize with a short comment from each of the four of you. Klaus, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, James. I think what's become clear also during this conference that now the ESPAS process has reached a very high degree of maturity. It has consolidated. It's somewhere very else where, when we compare to 5 years ago, and I think the work that has been done by all the participants, but especially also by Anne, has given us the possibility to be there. And the most recent ESPAS report gives us the possibility for what we call horizon scanning. So we have an idea, what's waiting for us out there. But I think, at least also in our debates, which we had in the ESPAS steering committee, beyond that, I think a consensus has been built that the challenge for the European Union institution is to build something which Jim Klaus normally calls strategic autonomy. And that's another progress, because we don't differ on that point. Strategic autonomy, of course, is not strategic autarky. That's a very different thing. We cannot provide everything ourselves. We are dependent on allies and partners. But strategic autonomy means that where the European Union needs to express the interest of European Union citizens, it can do that. Either with means it provides itself, or with means it's provided from outside, from partners or allies. And that's an important second step. So we are not only having a view on what's on the horizon, but I think we also agree that what we need in a world which is becoming a bit more difficult is something which we call strategic autonomy. From there, it's not very far to do a backcasting exercise. That means if our aim is strategic autonomy, what do we have to do over a certain time, let's say 10 years, to get there? And in fact, we made this exercise in Parliament with very limited means, but we made that exercise in January, involving all heads of units, directors, director generals on a number of issues, trying to say, okay, if that's our goal, what needs to be done over the next 10 years? If you do that, from there also it's not very far to arrive with some kind of multi-annual program. You are aware that in the Lisbon Treaty, the European Union institutions are challenged to establish a multi-annual program, which is initiated by the European Commission, so which could set precise goals to be achieved if the backcasting exercise has told us that strategic autonomy in a certain sector can only be achieved if we do something differently. And I think Vice President Šefčovič, his activity, for example, on batteries is exactly that. I think he has found out pretty early that batteries is something which is absolutely critical and therefore needs to be pursued. It cannot be pursued in a single year. It needs several years. But to be not dependent, but to have that strategic autonomy on batteries is absolutely crucial. And from there, then, it's not very far to say, if you have a multi-annual plan, what are we going to do next year? So I believe that the work we've been doing in ESPAS and also the collegiality that has been established, the confidence that has been established, has not only allowed us to do horizon scanning, it has also allowed us to reach a consensus on strategic autonomy, on the need for backcasting, on the need to have precise goals in a midterm range, and also therefore on the need that annual legislative programs cannot be separated from the rest. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Klaus. That sounds quite exhausting, to be honest, but it's a wonderful contribution. Thank you. Leo Schulte, over to you, please, replacing Jim this afternoon. Leo.
Thank you. Yes, indeed, you said that all know us here. Almost, I don't think that many people know me here, so I sit here for the Secretariat of the Council, replacing my Director General, Jim Klaus. and my name is Schulte Nordholt. And on behalf of Mr. Klaus, of Jim, I would like to tell you that he enjoyed the conference thoroughly, though he is not here now because he's now stuck in the General Affairs Council and pretty annoyed at that, I think. But excellent conference, and he asked to convey thanks to the organizers as always, because we as the Council Secretariat always feel a little bit guilty as a free rider, especially budget-wise, on what is all organized every time by these two fantastic teams on the sides of both the European Parliament, and I look at Danielle, and on the side of the Commission, and I look at Ricardo. So thank you for that. That is the main thing. Jim was especially impressed by the interventions that showed how we are seen from the outside, singling out Mrs. Suhasini Haidar, because we have been tended over the last few years to be a little bit too navel-gazing for various legitimate reasons, and it's very good to hear how we are seen from the side of India, even Russia, United States. We have been missing that. So to come back on what Klaus said, how to survive is the question for Jim as a postmodern construction, which we are, in what is a very modern world, which I actually would rather call an extremely old-fashioned world again. Well, that is, to come back to Professor Serfati, who must impress me just now, a very big challenge in the short term, in the next 5 to 8 years probably. But as he said, on the longer term, we may stand rather good chances. He bet that in 2030, we would still be at the top table. If there is a 2030, I think that he's right on that. Also because the ship is not anymore in direct danger of sinking. That's actually what was the conclusion of our dinner, our breakaway dinner yesterday. It perhaps never was, although many shouted that it was in the Euro crisis, in the Brexit times. But we are our own best sinkers in terms of denigrating ourselves. We still do that too much, but we got tougher. We are vaccinated now. And we have now a line to go, a strategic agenda, a compass from the heads. And, I will skip this, but I think that the new threats are completely different from the previous ones. That's what was said by several people here. And we single out two, we did so, that is the existential threat of civilization collapse by runaway climate change. And that in terms that could be sooner than rather than later. And the second are unforeseeable developments in the field of artificial intelligence. Harness AI and use it to improve humanity is the other big challenge. And both, that's what we think are, for both we stand perhaps a better chance than the other large actors, because this is not about hard power in the first place. This is about persuasion, it's about organization, it's about rule of law, about legislation, technical things, and that's where in the polynodal work where we hope that we can act, and ESPAS will be absolutely crucial with Commissioner Šefčovič in setting out the lines on how to get there. This is not short term, this is something that will be with us for the next 10, 20 years.
Well, thank you very much, Leo. We're sad that Jim isn't here, but we have loved you right from the beginning. You've been with us for the whole kind of exercise of ESPAS, so thank you very much for being here this evening for us. Anne, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, I mean, obviously, as we come to the end of this cycle, I actually have been reflecting a little bit about these past 5 years, and I have to say, for me personally, it's very satisfying to see ESPAS so strengthened throughout this period. And I think as chair, I also feel a certain sense of pride that I think I'm now leaving behind something that others can really build on. I mean, this is, when you say we consolidated, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, this has been a period of consolidation. Let me go back to the remarks I made this morning when I said, I mean, we live in an age of impunity. I mean, what you just referred to, Leo, I mean, just pretty much anything can happen. I mean, so it's very different. And I think that we literally, quite literally, have to be prepared for pretty much anything. And I believe that we can become more resilient to these constant disruptions if we can anticipate better. And for that, I believe that ESPAS can really help us to be more prepared and to have the kind of strategic discussions that oftentimes, let's be fair, simply cannot take place anywhere else. I mean, we have the kind of discussions that in very, very few places in the EU can take part. So if I hope to have left anything behind, it's really sort of a healthy debating culture, which I think we need. Also a very interdisciplinary way of working. We need to look at any kind of issues. We need to be allowed to look at any kind of issue really from a 360-degree perspective. We cannot be caught in our little silos and only be allowed to look at part of an issue. And this, I think, has been a great strength that this process and, let me say, also the work at the EPSC has had. But we also need the courage to really push the intellectual boundaries. And we need to have this courage without self-censorship. I really would argue that even in Europe, there is a degree of self-censorship sometimes. And I think that at least for the foresight community, we must really not have this kind of self-censorship, because otherwise we will only hurt ourselves. So, but we also, let's be very clear, we need to really also have sort of really an appetite to shape our future. We need to have curiosity about what is to come. This cannot be sort of just a discourse that is completely gripped with fear and anxiety about the future, because then we become paralyzed. And I think that this is sometimes a worry that I have, is that we become paralyzed simply because we are so scared about the future. So ESPAS is also an opportunity to perhaps not only, to experience the anxiety, but also to chart a positive future. So let me say that I'm deeply convinced that a strong Europe is not only important for Europe itself, but every time we have this discussion, I realize that a strong Europe is also important for the world. Because let's be fair. I mean, some of the discussions we're having here, you simply couldn't have elsewhere in the world. And I think it's very important that ESPAS be there and to facilitate the kind of discourse, not only between Europeans, but really with colleagues from around the world. So let me just say that for the future, I think it would be good if ESPAS could help to create perhaps a little bit more unity on some key issues. And I was intrigued by what the colleague from the French Senate just said, where she said these are not political reports, because when it is about the future, it becomes less political in many ways, So perhaps we can use ESPAS to forge more unity within some of our debates. And also, you're absolutely right, Klaus, when you say what has been established is an enormous trust between the institutions. And if that trust could exist not just within the ESPAS process, but could really be sort of extended throughout the institutions and throughout the member states, I think ESPAS can play an important role here. Thank you.
And thank you very much indeed. I should have said in opening my introduction to you that, and thank you for accepting my kind of expression of the consolidation phase. This would not have happened without your superb leadership. And can we all thank Anne very much indeed for what you've done. And so to our last commentator, Hervé Delphin, you are replacing Christian Leffler, I think, this afternoon. So, Hervé, over to you, please.
Hello. I'm Hervé Delphin, the head of strategic policy planning in the External Action Service. And in that capacity, I joined the ESPAS network a few years ago when I took office. And I must say I always relished these moments because there was a space where we could discuss, we could engage in earnest, in trust, and if anything, over this period of time, I really feel energized by this conference, and I want also to say nothing would be possible if it had not been for Anne, if it had not been for Klaus. Because if you don't have, and I think there was one point raised during these days, you need to, the locus of strategic or foresight has to be close to the executive. It has to be owned by the executive. If you don't have this connection, you lose traction. You don't have the momentum that allows you to carve out the space for thinking. When I joined the ES, the first thing I ask my colleagues is, how can I best serve you? please carve out space for her to think strategically. They were always in the grind mill of the day work. And that was when we were looking at foresight. You have always to think, okay, I have to serve a political master. Political master, you have to connect to his language, so not educate them, but connect to what the expectations. And it's true, especially in foreign policy, you're driven by events, you're driven by crisis. Yet, there is a form of foresight that has been mentioned, which is horizon scanning, assessment of threats and risk that we have developed in External Action Service, which is more short to medium term, let's say less than 1 year horizon. Yet it cannot be enough. We need also this ability to look beyond the horizon line, to see what is emerging. And this is more the strategic dimension of what will come up in a 5-10 years horizon. Usually you try to shove off because it's too complex. What does it bring to my day point? What we learned through the ESPAS report is that there are trends that if you don't act on it now, they will be there and you will have to undergo them rather than shape them. And if anything that has to be drawn for the EU is that others are always on the lookout to be the first movers. And we are on the receiving end. And I think we need, through ESPAS, through strategic foresight, to reverse this, that allow the EU to be in a position to be the first mover. And we are doing in certain areas, like on climate change, we are really on top of this. On digital, we missed a few trains on the 5G and others, and Anne knows this perfectly. But still, we are not losing completely, but we have to gear up to this. And this is what I really think is what ESPAS should bring in. What I took also from the 2 days is that I was somehow reassured by the feedback we got from the audience, that we were pretty well placed on the European side because of the fact that foresight is located in all institutions and not just in one. What I also found very interesting was the fact that we are connecting to others, to you. And I think this is the other element which is key to ESPAS that we need to nourish.
Maybe we can give Anne the last word. No? You can't resist that. So please.
Well, no, I mean it's been an exciting journey. No, what I want to do is thank my team, because they've done a great job. But, I mean, even though I'm sort of the person in the front, I could have never done it without, especially this man, Ricardo Borges de Castro. Why don't you stand up? You really deserve the round of applause. That's what I want. I mean, good foresight is teamwork. I mean, we could have never done this without sort of this constant back and forth of ideas, of bringing in others, inspiring us. And, I mean, it's really been, an exciting journey and a privilege of a lifetime. And I think... Yeah. Exactly. That's what I was just about to say.
Okay, no, listen, we've always got on very well, so this is great. I'd like to thank all of you for the collective leadership that you've given to ESPAS, not just this year, but in the previous years. Because I think you're spot on that it's the collectivity, it's the collective responsibility, the shared fun, in a way, to be exploring, to be pathfinders of looking at the shock and saying, gosh, there's only one guy I know who knows anything about 5G in the house. I'm not letting any secrets go, but hey, wait a moment, there are worrying moments around here. So I think that it's actually been extraordinarily valuable in this particular time, as you were pointing out too, is to have the confidence and to know we can meet and to know we can say anything we like and we won't suddenly find it on Twitter the following day. It's a superb kind of leadership because it spills over into other domains as well. So that being said, I have a couple of short comments that I've been instructed by my boss to say. That's Anthony in the corner here. He used to work for me, but I now work for him. So he's asked me in wrapping up, could I say special thanks to all those who have been involved in organizing this day. You've already thanked Ricardo and the others for yesterday, so I can now, on behalf of Klaus and Anthony, and of course Frank, and after all, you're running this place now. So thank you very much indeed for ensuring everything went impeccably, Frank, today, and for all the team of the ESPAS Global Trends Room. I'm also empowered to announce, empowerment's a good word, isn't it, Anthony? We coined that a long time ago, that the next ESPAS conference has already been decided by the wonderful ESPAS committee, and this will be on the 18th and 19th of November 2020. So with that being said, thank you all very much for coming. Have a safe journey home. And thank you above all for being such a wonderfully participatory audience. It's been a great time. Thank you.